Welcome to the Bold SLP podcast. We are so happy that you're here and can't wait to share with you all of the amazing conversations we've been having.
We are the co-founders of the Bold SLP Collective, and we are also your hosts, Lisa, Desi, and myself, Ingrid. Each of us has a variety of experiences in all things bilingual and bimodal speech-language pathology. You'll get to know us pretty well on here.
We started this podcast to share our lived experiences, but also because we want to bring advocacy and cultural humility to the forefront of every speech therapy conversation. We hope that you'll join us each week, and we hope that you enjoy this episode.
Welcome back to the Bold SLP podcast. I have Desi and Ingrid with me, and today we have a special guest, Camille Wagner Rodriguez.
Yes, I met Camille on Instagram. Like, these relationships seem to be forming lately. I love it. She is recently fully certified CCC SLP as of last week. Camille works as a bilingual speech-language pathologist at the MADR lab. MADR stands for Multilingual Aphasia and Dementia Research Lab at the University of Texas at Austin. She is a bilingual speech-language pathologist by training, and her research investigates neurologically based communication disorders within the context of bilingualism. So I think you guys can all tell why she's here. Welcome, Camille. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah.
You have an impressive resume. Yes, I love it.
Well, I'm working with a great group of other SLPs who are also bilingual, and this is kind of like the big goal of the lab altogether, just to just bring everyone, give credit where credit is due. I work with clinicians from Spain. I work with Dr. Stephanie Grasso, who's the primary investigator in the lab, who's my mentor and was my CF supervisor as well. So we work with clinicians in Mexico, and so it's a very collaborative effort, and I feel very, very lucky to be one of them in this really unique group of SLPs.
Thanks. So when we were preparing for this episode, I think the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about and share with our audience, because we've had this conversation before on your podcast, but your podcast is in Spanish, primarily in Spanish, which is so needed, and which is why you did it. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit of how you got here.
My podcast is Somos SLP, so that is SOMOS SLP. Yes.
Yes. Somos SLP, which is we are SLPs, really.
Yeah.
It's what it stands for all of our listeners who don't speak Spanish. And as soon as we saw her pop up on our For You page, because I think when you put bilingual SLP on your bio, it tends to show you everybody else who has bilingual SLP on their bio. And I remember bringing you up to Desi, and then you DM'd me on the Bold SLP podcast account, and you were like, I love this. Let's do something together.
Yeah, I really like your mission statement and how you sort of put it together really resonated with me, because part of what I want to do with, or the mission for Somos SLP is to just boldly be SLPs in Spanish. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't have to always stick to English. Bilingual means two languages, right? We have to be able to stand in our language and be proud and be able to talk about our field in our language, not just because it's our language, but because it helps us become better clinicians. Because the more you talk about a topic, the easier it is to, turn it into layman's terms for your clients, students, patients, whomever you're working with. And I feel like it's so important. I needed that space coming from Puerto Rico, because I really didn't find it. So when I moved to the States to do grad school, I was really seeking for resources in my native language, because just having to learn all of this and not having resources in my language, and it's like I came to a program where there was a bilingual certificate, and so I had some. And I had two great mentors, one for pediatrics and one for Dr. Grasso, who was now the primary investigator in my lab. So I was so blessed and lucky. I feel spoiled that I had them both. Well, Dr. Lugo, the first 2 episodes of my podcast, shameless plug, and then Dr. Grasso as well. Yeah, I found myself in a very unique position, but still, when I had to talk to patients, there was a little bit of an unbalanced experience for me there. And so I sought mini courses from Chile and other things to kind of supplement. And then I was just like, I just want to do it myself. So I did.
You started your own thing.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? Like, I feel like we have the same conversation over and over again, you guys, regardless of what setting we're discussing, that we have to come out and somehow still teach ourselves a lot in order to be good clinicians to communities that are linguistically diverse. And it just makes me wonder if the 92% is doing that. Like, what? I don't see those conversations happening in other places all the time. So
I just want to mention that when we started the podcast, Camille, you mentioned like, this is a safe space. I know about podcasts, like I have one. And I think it's just that we don't always feel safe in our spaces, especially in our professional spaces. And it just turns into us having to create our own. And that's the safest place. And we make it safe for our clients and adults, children, whoever you work with. But I totally feel that. And you mentioned about being bold and confident and just who you are. And that translates to your patients. Because the more insecure you are, or uncomfortable with who you are, is what they're going to feel. And
yeah.
I appreciate that. I think you said, like I needed it. I was just like so hungry to know about everything in our field, because you guys know our scope of practice is very limited, very, very limited. There's not much we can do. So
hashtag sarcasm.
Hashtag please. No, but I feel like there was just so much to learn and so much we can do, and I always think it back of going back home eventually. And so if I go back home and it's like 75% monolingual Spanish, functional English, like I need to know. I need to know what to do. Like it was a bit of a how do you say it? Self-serving enterprise, but at the same time, I feel like I wanted to put something out there that I would have needed myself. I don't feel like, and I don't know if this is kind of the minority ethos in me, like I don't feel like people need to struggle if I already did it, If I already run through it, there's no reason why you need to struggle too.
Yes.
I know how to make it. I know how to get there. Let me just set things up so more people can get there, more people can get the knowledge, more people can have access to this. And yeah, so that was kind of like my little self-serving, but a little bit forward.
I don't think it's self-serving at all. Like you're thinking about more than you. You're thinking about your entire community. And there's a whole group of people that are not getting service because it's outside of the scope or different reasons.
Like I just made little hands blowing my mind, because it's fascinating to me how there's all this talk about the need, but then when it comes to like creating the funds or creating the opportunities, it's just like, we don't have the professionals to do this. So, and it's just like, really, why don't you you did the research, like, or here's the research.
Where's the money? Yeah, there's always money that can be thrown around for that kind of stuff, but the money would have to be mobilized by somebody who's probably not part of that community.
Yeah. So you've kind of woven into our next discussion point, which was, what does being a bilingual SLP look like for someone in your setting? So you're researching and you're with adults. That's like a foreign language to me.
It's not difficult to learn. I really enjoy it. I think that my level of the energy I bring to a therapy session is more suited for adults. Like,
I'm sure you could relate to this, Camille, but like the more authentic you are, your authentic self, the more you resonate with it, no matter the age. So kids know when someone's like, your turn, my turn, versus, oh, it's you now. like they get it, even
Yeah.
if they're 4 years old. So
that's really reassuring, because if I ever need to switch settings, it would have
Yeah,
been
no.
catastrophic.
Yeah.
No,
No.
I was exactly like that too. That's why I thought I'm going to start with middle school.
Yeah.
And then I went to elementary and I was like, oh, I do have the energy for this. I just need to rewrite the script in my brain of what a school-based SLP looks like.
Yeah.
But
I
anyway,
think,
go ahead.
yeah,
You
I
started,
think
you're with
that's,
adults.
I'm with adults, right? I do. So I work with adults who have neurodegenerative diseases. So we work with primary progressive aphasia due to neurodegenerative disease impacting different parts of the brain and different types of pathology. Being bilingual in my setting, I get a lot of questions from patients that are related to those monolingual myths of bilingualism. So, for example, I get questions like, "Oh, why do I need to work on my second language if I only need to speak my first language in my home? When I go outside, I probably need to speak my second language, but at home, it's only my first language." Then we have a conversation of how we really want to treat the the functional needs of the language system, right? And so I get to have with adults these neat conversations about like, what is a language? What is your language system? These more like cognitive topics. I work a lot with the family members who are dealing with a progression of disease and having to make difficult decisions. And this part's really interesting because Hispanic cultures are very different than mainstream American. And I also do a lot of just learning about how these symptoms come up in different languages and how these symptoms come up across languages and how they interact within the person's same language system. Everybody's very different. And as we know, grammar is the same for every language. Of course it is. That's why Brown's stages of development are applicable to everyone.
Oh,
no, ma'am. I can't. I mean, no. Yeah.
Living for Camille's sarcasm today. I think you could like peds if you hung out with us.
She's not wrong. Like MLU and Brown's morphemes were drilled into us. Like they were the end all be all. The number of language samples we had to take with these specific morphemes in mind, and then meeting kids with other languages, and like it just didn't apply to them at all. So they would get the lowest scores, even though they had all the. Yep, I get you. I totally get you.
And sometimes we have these like standardized best practice measures that are like, and also for adults, mean length of utterance. If you think of morphemes, then like I can say cometelo, and it has more morphemes because you eat it. It's 3 technically, really. Pero cometelo is about 4 porque está comer, right?
Yeah, one word means what a whole sentence would mean.
Yeah, so it's very, very different, and we do also see that that difference.
Sign language, for example, you'd have the sign like pretty, and then you have like beautiful, which is the exact same, but the expression changes. How do you translate that into morphemes? And I know it's a bigger meaning, larger vocabulary, but you'd have to have a certain way of reading that, and none of what we studied would help with this.
Yeah. So one of the things I did before becoming an SLP is I went ahead and I got a master's in linguistics because I was there.
Just casually.
And one of the things that fascinates me about sign language is just that for syntax, it's really, really hard to apply those theories. But for phonology, you can apply phonological theories to sign languages. And it maps pretty consistently. Obviously, there's differences, and there's differences in spoken languages, but you can consider that opening of those eyes kind of like a suprasegmental feature, right? Like something that you lay over the base sign. So I can geek out about languages and phonology and do all the things all the days. In my field of research SLP, there really is very few bilingual research SLPs and very few bilingual SLPs who are doing work not in English. So my lab exclusively does not work with English. We work with English. We work with Spanish right? If it's Spanish and English, that's okay. But it has to be Spanish and something. It could be just monolingual Spanish, Spanish and Catalan. We have a really great collaboration going in Spain, in the region of Barcelona, with a couple of hospitals there. And then we see local individuals that are Spanish and English. And then we just see monolingual Spanish speakers. So I feel like I'm a little spoiled in that sense, because I speak Spanish all day at work. Like, it's not like I went to lab meeting today and it was in Spanish. I saw my teletherapy clients in Spanish. We code switch sometimes in meetings, but it can really, just run in Spanish if we needed to.
Your reports are also written in Spanish?
We don't write reports. We take extensive data.
Living the dream.
Yeah, the spreadsheets never end with you, huh?
We got spreadsheets. We got Smartsheet. We got Qualtrics. We got Excel. We got Box. We have so many platforms we use.
I will take data over report any day, honestly.
Yeah.
You say that now.
We do because we do our treatment. So our study is a treatment study. So essentially we have a treatment protocol we're using. We have 2 different treatment protocols. But for each treatment protocol, our pre-treatment testing is 6 hours per language. We sometimes get them really early on in their diagnosis, so they're also going through some form of grief and acceptance of their diagnosis. And so I've had people just break down crying. I used to be able to do this last year. I don't know why I don't know what this is. I used to use this all the time, Then I give them the first syllable and they're like, it's a funnel, whatever it is. I'm thinking of the naming tests we give. But yeah, there's some counseling that also goes into it, and going at their own pace and taking their time. And so, yeah, I really enjoy working with our adult patients. I think that I think that a lot of people are concerned to step into that space of grief and concerned about allowing themselves to be exposed to that. But I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of the job we do, particularly with neurodegenerative disease, because they're not going to get better. Yeah. With treatment, you're hoping to delay the effects of the disease by working on maintenance, by working on some rehabilitation and maintenance of skills they still have, and then just preparing for the future. Right. And I find that those conversations are really worthwhile. And I don't know. I find that I like working in that space. So that's partially also why I like working with adults, just that counseling piece.
That's really interesting, because I about a year and a few months ago, I stopped working in medical SLP. And I don't know if it was just also the effect of the pandemic, but I really burnt out on that piece. I worked in home health, and I had a lot of patients who were sent home and discharged kind of when they were still a little bit too frail. Like, they could have benefited from a few more days being inpatient. So it's great to hear that you feel like you are in a setting where you can provide adequate, what's the word I'm looking for, counseling. I loved working in home health in the sense that things were very functional. People were home, they were in their best setting. But I did find that sometimes it was overwhelming to have to do therapy in your own home. So, yeah. And I don't know if that contributes to that complicated counseling piece.
What does funding look like at your clinic?
So because it's a research study, we don't charge individuals for therapy. And so everything is part of, we do grants, fellowships, mini grants. The way we get funded is a little bit above my pay grade at this point. But I'm probably going to get a little bit more involved with those applications as time moves forward and I get a little bit more breadth of experience in the lab. Yeah. But yeah, it's grants, it's research.
I'm wondering about bilingualism in general. Like, I think that one of the hardest things to break down for other people who don't work with children who are bilingual, who don't work with adults who are bilingual. People who aren't bilingual, for example, may struggle with the idea that a person that contains two monolingual people, right? That anyone who is bilingual or trilingual or multilingual, you're not going to be the same as a monolingual in terms of your language ability or strengths or even fluency. So I was just wondering if you could just give us an idea of how that plays out in a disease process. And then what kind of education do you do with families who may be wondering, like, what's going on? Why?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. It is, like you said, we are not two monolingual people in one. And Lisa's not two trilingual people, three monolingual people in one. She's not a monolingual signer. I think what the biggest misconception is that one language versus another, it's an individual entity. When really languages are a representation of underlying cognitive processes and structures. So all of that conceptual knowledge, all of the processing you do for grammar, it can happen in any language. The language is the label, right? The language being the sounds that make a word, the hand shapes and moves that make a sign. Because regardless of the mode of language you're using, you're still processing it in one system. You're choosing depending on the context, and there's many interesting theories on how we choose what language we want to use and how we use it. Like, most definitely, I feel super comfortable speaking with you guys, and I will never talk to a patient with like sarcasm sprinkled throughout.
Oh no!
Oh no! Oh my God! And I speak to my patients in my therapist voice, which is a lot slower. Yeah. Like just going, at a slower pace. And that's definitely true. Because when we see a disease process like this, we can see either unbalanced deficits, or we can see balanced deficits, and balanced deficits kind of like at the surface level. And then that's what indicates kind of more of a conceptual deficit going on underlying. Or it could just be balanced deficits at the surface level. Like there's no one pattern that's predominant across bilinguals, because we also have to take into consideration language history and language dominance.
Yeah, so thinking about what you said about conceptual, is that like with concepts like perro and dog? Like,
yeah.
Okay. So somebody may experience the loss of that word or that concept, or
it's lost for both languages.
Right.
It's lost for both languages. Sometimes people can say, "Oh, I was walking down the street and I saw, el perro, the dog. Yes, the dog." Right, and that happens with patients who are not going through any neurodegenerative process, like regular bilinguals. That happens. Healthy bilinguals, I should say. That happens naturally. There can be competition because of dominance. There can be competition because of context. I can't count in English to save my life. Like when I was a barista and I was closing the till, I had to, see, disfluency. Tenía que cuadrar la caja. I had to get the till in order. I had to count it out, balance out, make sure it was all ready to go. And when I did it in English, it was so much slower for me. But in Spanish, I could do it in my head. I could do that because the way I learned math was in Spanish. And the way I used math for most part of my life was in Spanish. So math, I math in Spanish.
I was going to say, I math in English. It's really hard for me to break. I can't manage it. Math. I don't math.
Zero language.
Well, you know what's funny? I math in English, but I history in Spanish. Because all my art history, world history classes, all of them were in Spanish, but chemistry, physics, math, algebra, geometry, even when I was 15, I took them in English in Mexico. So I math in English.
I just love that we've all turned math into a verb.
Yes.
Or
Yeah, so it depends on dominance, and dominance can be a factor of how long have you used the language for? What context have you
language
used
context,
the
yes.
language for? The context of use. Did you have experience learning it in a formal setting? Did you have experience only learning it in an quote unquote informal setting? Because home setting, I feel like it's pretty formal. You do learn very specific
Yes.
language use rules there. So that's why I'm like quote unquote informal. Because we have a lot of heritage speakers that are bilingual by
Yeah.
by definition. They're bilingual. They're not literate in one language, but they're bilingual. And that's where you get into all these like labels like biliterate, bimodal, bilingual. You get into all of these. And with biliterate, you also include people who can read and write different scripts also. So there's a whole world of how to categorize or understand bilingualism and the relationship of languages for a person, like relationships of languages for a person, for the person's language history. And so we take an in-depth look at that language history, particularly for those individuals who tend to be more balanced, for those individuals who work or who report to have worked in both languages. I've worked with teachers who were Spanish teachers in schools and spoken English in their home. So half of their day is spent working in one language, half of the day is spent interacting and socializing with family and friends in another. And we use this tool called the Bilingual language profile that gives us an index of dominance at the end. And so that's how we sometimes make these, calculated, informed decisions of like, hey, this person is demonstrating a little more dominance in Spanish or in English, but functionally, what are they using? So person who is not bilingual, who does not speak another language, encounters someone who is, that's the most they could do for a bilingual SLP. Just collect a language history. Send me the referral with a language history. Give me something.
Well, this is a big overlap then, because I feel the same way about working with kids. It's just the opposite phenomenon, right? Like you expect their language to improve as opposed to somebody with a progressive illness. And it's funny that you're describing an adult going through a disease process, because I'm thinking about one of the kids on my caseload who's the opposite. I mean, she's just got a lot of different opportunities throughout her day to be exposed to both. And it just turns out that English is on the heavier side of things, much to her mother's dismay. So for me as a clinician to figure out like what targets she's most interested in, they're in English. How do I balance that with Spanish when I do my treatment?
Yeah.
And then how do we manage carryover in a bilingual daycare that's mostly monolingual English speakers? It's really challenging. It's really nice to hear that, the foundations for what we do, like that language history piece, is still the kind of the golden rule.
Right, the foundation for what you do too. Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things that we have to consider, particularly for a disease process, is that it's a process. There's no way for us to stop it. With therapy, we can help delay some of the effects, help teach compensatory strategies when the patient is still able to learn new behaviors and learn new strategies, so that when they need them the most, they already learn them and they can apply it. Another thing we have to keep in mind is that their communication has to still be functional, regardless of the degree of progression. So sometimes we have to make the hard call to not treat in both languages because they're really not using their second language functionally anymore. And with their level of progression, it might just be the more responsible clinical decision to just train one language and work on optimizing those skills with the hope to support functional communication throughout progression. Those are the hardest calls to make. But sometimes it's essentially what's clinically best for the patient, and we then do provide some support in the other language, but the brunt of the therapeutic load is going to be on that first language or that language.
Following the patient, like you're following the dominant language that's still in them. You're not making the call as many monolinguals do. Well, this is the language for this country, so this is the one you need to speak. When they don't have much of that to begin with.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say that's
It is a
different.
hard call, but it's, you know, it's the right one because you're still respecting your patient. It's just sad to lose one
Yeah.
of the languages that's in you because it's a gift. It's really a gift to be multilingual.
And as a bilingual person,
Say, I have a more
Woo!
jaded view of it. I think of my dad who
Mhm.
learned English when he was, how old was he? I was 16. He was 40 something.
Mhm.
And he talks less and less in English. He's 61 now, and he's about to retire. And him and my mom are going and spending more and more time in Mexico. And I can see that he's like, I don't need it.
Oh, wow.
And to me, like, it's almost like he had to learn English to survive.
Yeah.
So for him to say, I don't need it. My girls are grown. Hopefully my grandkids speak both, and hopefully I can, live the rest of my life in my home, traveling to my home country, and I don't
Mhm.
need it. Like he uses it for what he needs.
Yeah, and that can also be the case, right? If a patient just, no, I don't want to.
Yeah,
We
I
have to
just
respect that,
totally see
right?
my dad. Like he's like, I don't need it just for what I need it.
You're gonna be like, Camille, like, talk to my dad.
Well, and I was thinking about him already because my dad teaches math and physics. So I'm sure he doesn't need it to chat about books or life, but he needs it for math and physics, for
Yeah.
all those things that he uses it the most for. But
Yeah, and I think that for a lot of people, a lot of, the people we see with these progressive diseases, sometimes and at least the ones I've worked with, in Spain, bilingualism is their norm.
I was going to ask you that
Like
because you work with
they
people
don't
in
know any
Europe.
other way,
Yeah.
They don't know any other way of being, and so it's kind of jarring to also start losing that part of themselves, which is just like, what, it's not what,
It's
like
not
I've
rare.
seen people be like, I don't know what I'm gonna do if I can't speak both languages, because their social context is so reliant on that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, how the contrast that you see, like discussing these topics with SLPs from Spain, like how important it is for you to determine dominance and, all of
Oh,
that. And
they're
for
on
them,
board. They're
yeah,
on
for
board.
them, it's probably like their bread and butter. They've been doing it forever. It's nothing new. Everybody's on board. And for
Yeah.
us, it's like we
This
have to
yeah,
scream it out into the rooftops.
Yeah, pull teeth.
yeah. The I'm going to say this in Spanish because I learned it in Spanish in la Universidad de Puerto Rico. La exotización del bilingüismo, like making bilingualism exotic, is a phenomenon very proper to the US and to, the hegemonic forces. And I come from the Caribbean, so I'm thinking about all those colonial powers that came in and implemented these language education policies that essentially tried to erase indigenous languages.
Mhm.
In Puerto Rico, they tried, pero no pudieron. No funcionó. With the U.S., the Spanish did a little better job, but the U.S., nope, we still speak Spanish. We're a Spanish dominant island. We use a lot of vocabulary still that is related to our Spanish heritage, and so into our
Yes, I
African
think
heritage
Desi,
as
you put
well.
together that resource
See,
about
Desi, she's my neighbor, isn't she?
the
I am.
Taino words that
Mhm.
influence
Oh,
English.
Mirayuca, mofongo, batey,
Word.
calley, guaynabo, guayama.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's super fascinating because even within Cuba, like I could use like a lot of words, just very specific regional words that other people from the other side of the island would have no idea what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating, and when I was a kid growing up, I was an English language learner. I was labeled as such. I didn't really want to improve my Spanish. Like I was a selective monolingual. I was like, no, I don't need this. and by the time I got to college, it really was like, okay, come on, like I should really improve my Spanish. And what you said really at the beginning of the episode spoke to me a lot about trying to navigate professional conversations or just conversations of a different register. That was what really was the hardest part for me. I was going to say me costó. I was going to say it cost me. Oh no.
See?
All right. Anyway, so I think that it's really cool that, there are other people like you who are also trying to move this effort forward. Like, there are a lot of heritage speakers, there are a lot of bilingual speakers, and we have so much power within us. It's just, how do we mobilize it and get those people to become clinicians and to do this kind of work? So
yeah. And I love that you mentioned the heritage speakers, because the breadth of cultural insight they have is incomparable to anything you'll find in a textbook or an anthropology class. Like, seriously. They can, if they feel like they can do some formal language instruction to get those grammatical structures and los acentos y las cosas, things we need to fluff our language with. Yeah. But truly, the cultural insight they have, and whoever's listening who's a heritage speaker who feels a little, who feels low self-esteem or doesn't feel confident in their heritage language proficiency, just go for it. Do you know how many, like, before I worked in this setting, do you know how bright my patients' eyes would shine when they heard me speak my Spanish? Like, I never had to change my accent. I never had to pronounce my S's. No, la S se quedaban aspirada in my sessions. It's a point of connection, and I think it's a point of also visibility for them. So to all the heritage language speakers, you can do it. We can do it. That gives you a little bit of a license.
Did you feel that pep talk? Because she was telling us at the previous episode that she doesn't feel like she knows enough Sri Lankan to help people. And
Camille is talking straight to you, Lisa.
Just throwing it right back at me. Yeah, I don't know much Tamil, and the whole thing is that they came as refugees, so they just to keep us safe, and they were worried about terrorists and things like that. They were just so nervous, so they just said, just hide in the French and English, and nobody will ever know. But hello, my color, my name, like my passport, I can't hide it. And I'm truly like blessed to be surrounded by like strong women who are proud of their heritage and who they are, because I was just always surrounded by whiteness, and I was just always othered and never felt good enough. So I love what you're saying about these heritage speakers and the breadth of knowledge, that what they bring is more than anything we could read about that's been diluted through colonization and whatnot.
Through white publishers.
I think this is a good place to end.
I went to the University of Puerto Rico. We got some deep revolutionary roots there. So we want to talk about critical history, we could talk about that. No, but I think that one of the things that with the podcast, at least with my podcast, and I see this reflected in your podcast as well, I don't want people to feel that who they are isn't enough, first of all. And secondly, there's people out there who need you as you are. If you find this immigrant family from Sri Lanka and you can just ask them, what is your name? What is your child's date of birth? What is their name? And have it, just that level of connection is going to be so powerful for them. Like even those basic little things that if you write a child's date of birth wrong, everything goes out the door. Like,
you said this is a good place to end. What we'll do now, we'll just get to the last word. Thank you so much, Camille, for coming on. I think I'll go first. My last word from this episode, I think, will be heritage. I really liked what you said about heritage speakers. Besides the fact that I felt seen by that, but I also think that it's important to have other people be proud of their heritage. And it's something that I think is a big message of our podcast. So what about everyone else?
My last word is hope, because Camille is in a program in a place that didn't exist for me when I was starting the field. And it makes me so hopeful that she's having this experience now, like as a recent CF and now full-fledged clinician. And then I can tell all the mentees who ask me, like, what programs do you know of? I can say, like, with all my heart, like, UT Austin has a program and they're working in Spanish. So I have a lot of hope after this conversation.
I can't think of a single word, but I have a thought based on what you said, that there are SLPs all over the world, outside of America, that speak their native language, and there's no excuse in terms of interpretation, whatever. So I'm trying to think of a one word that says all over the world.
That's it. No excuse.
No excuses.
We're global.
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 Desi with the words.
Oh my gosh.
Camille, do you want to join in our last word?
Yeah, I think my last word, and for all of you guys, is, I said in the beginning of the podcast that, this is like Lisa said, this is a safe space. I said to Lisa, this is a safe space. Don't worry about tech issues. I'm fine with those. But I think that definitely, like Lisa said, I have a little phrase. I think that creating space is something that you guys are also helping to do, because, we sometimes, if there isn't a space for us, we just gotta make it ourselves. And I feel like your podcast and your enterprise, your vision for the Bold SLP Collective really resonated with me in that sense, because it's just taking ownership of who we are and what we have to offer, and just moving forward with it. And I want to thank you guys for putting that forward and for creating the space for more people to feel seen and feel heard and see that, we can take up space. Because there's a lot of space in the world, and there's enough for us too. So
the globe is big.
The globe is big.
Yay.
It's round and big.
Depends on who you ask, but yes.
Thank you so much, Camille.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and supporting the Bold SLP Collective. You can find a closed caption version of this podcast on our YouTube channel. We will also have show notes on our website. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you do all the podcast things. Follow, subscribe, download, and review. And don't forget, we love hearing from you, so connect with us on Instagram at the Bold SLP Collective. Stay bold and humble. See you next time.